This is the On the Pony Express podcast, part of the On3 network. Check out all the SMU coverage you need at ontheponyexpress.com. Now, here's your host, Billy Embody. Billy Embody. 1, 2, 3, let me go.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. I am Billy Embody. We have some breaking news into the podcast, but first, we are presented by Status Jet. Our friends at Status Jet can help get you from point A to point B with a level of luxury that you should expect from a chartered jet experience, getting you guys not only from point A to point B with that meticulous approach to finding the right aircraft for you, the crew, all of the things that you expect from a private jet experience, they can do for you. They can also help you buy and sell an aircraft. Reach out to them at 866-405-1225. Go to statusjet.com and tell them On the Pony Express sent you, or mention code PONYUPACC to help you elevate your flying experience with a private jet. The Super Bowl is this weekend. You're losing time, but there is still that opportunity with their team. They can handle you guys and your need to get from point A to point B in a private jet. If your plans fell through with other companies, they'll be happy to help you as well as get you a jump start on your spring break trip planning as well with Status Jet. So reach out to them, David Henry and his team, proud supporters of SMU Athletics and the On the Pony Express podcast. Well, Rhett Lashlee chirped me a little bit when we were talking at the signing day press conference for him and his program, saying before I ask, they do have news on a 12th game, and that game is going to be a week 0 matchup in Reno, Nevada, playing the Nevada Wolfpack. So SMU does get its 2024 schedule complete with the news of that game being scheduled. SMU gets to take on that program, which went 2-10 last year in 2023 and finished 2-6 in Mountain West play. The Wolfpack will return to the Hilltop in 2028 for a home game. So this is a home-and-home series. But big news for SMU and critical news, because this is an FBS game. There was the potential that SMU was going to have to play an FCS game or which would involve adding an 8th home game, which SMU had already billed out those season ticket costs. So they avoid kind of having to navigate that as well. Again, Vanderbilt had bought out the game and the series for SMU this season and years to come, dodging the Mustangs, which Rhett Lashlee kind of made light of as well, saying kind of what a world that a program in the SEC is scared to play SMU. But that is what happened. Vanderbilt bought out the series, opening this window for SMU to add a different game, and they will do that now with Nevada. So Rhett Lashlee and the Mustangs will play. It'll be August. Get ready. August 24th in Reno to kick off the college football season. I do believe that also means that SMU will start camp a week earlier. So look at that. SMU is going to be getting us even quicker to the 2024 football season. It also means SMU will have a bye week baked in before the Mustangs take on, I believe it'll be TCU. So they'll play, they'll play Nevada, they'll play Houston Christian, they'll play BYU, and then they'll get a bye ahead of the TCU game, which will be nice before that kind of murderer's row run of TCU, Florida State, and Louisville, 3 straight weeks there in that schedule that completes the 2024 football schedule. So now we can start breaking it down, which we will do later this month, right around the start of spring ball. I've already got some kind of state of the ACC pieces for you guys at ontheponyexpress.com, where we will break down with some beat reporters what SMU is walking into when it comes to the ACC. We'll also have that for you guys on the podcast format at some point. We're going to kind of break it up. I'm not going to ask too much of the beat reporters to just do some homework every other month, it seems like. But what we'll do is we'll have them break down their teams going into the spring practice and kind of early spring ball. And then post spring ball, we'll have them on the podcast as they kind of go into summer. And then once we get into the season, we'll have them back on and do some fall camp stuff and things like that. So I'm excited about that. It is kind of not full off season because SMU will start spring ball at the end of February. So I mentioned that on the pod, either kicking off this week or next week or last week, but SMU just weeks away from starting spring practice. And now they have their entire schedule set. And they also have tweaked their coaching staff, which Rhett Lashlee talked about with the media Wednesday night. So here are some of the tweaks to the program for you guys. Is we know that SMU does love itself some coordinator titles, but some of these were deserved and some of these were used to fight off some of those programs coming after some of SMU's coaches on staff. So Casey Woods returns as offensive coordinator and tight ends coach. He's also chief of staff. So Rhett Lashlee giving him a little bit more leeway to kind of work with him and kind of make sure the direction on some things that he wants done is, being done that way. And then you also have Scott Simons, who returns as defense coordinator, which is a huge deal. And SMU was able to hold on to him, gets a new deal done, and gets that reworked, but also fought off, multiple jobs that were big time jobs that Scott Simons, was being looked at, and rightfully so, for the work he did at SMU. And he is back on the hilltop along with Ricky Hunley, who does get promoted to co-defensive coordinator, and Maurice Crum gets promoted to co-defensive coordinator. And then Calvin Thibodeau is back as a defensive line coach. Sam Dunham is now the edge rushers coach. And then you've got on the offensive side, Kyle Cooper, special teams coordinator, running backs coach, Rob Likens, associate head coach, co-offensive coordinator, wide receivers coach, Garen Justice, assistant head coach, offensive line coach, and now adds co-offensive coordinator to his title. And then you have that is kind of it, I think. And then De'Aaron King, quarterbacks coach. So that was some of the tweaks that Rhett Lashlee announced with us, the media, on Wednesday. And now it's kind of full bore towards spring ball. The coaches will get some time off here, post signing day, and then they will return back to work when they'll get, really ramped up for spring practice. So we will have that coverage for you guys as that unfolds. As we get closer to that, we'll have your full coverage of that. But for SMU, this is a time of year where you're going to see, a lot of kind of resetting. This is that time where SMU can relax as a coaching staff, and the players are back at work with Sean Griswold. They'll start getting into their OTAs later this month in tune-up ahead of spring practice. And we'll talk a lot about that as it gets closer. But I wanted to kind of focus on, now that the schedule is set for the most part, one, you do have this kind of, I think the lineup it goes 3-3-3-3 in terms of the schedule. So you get 3 weeks in a bye, 3 weeks in a bye, 3 weeks in a bye, and then the season is over with that final 3-game stretch for the regular season, at least. And Rhett Lashlee was asked during our media session just kind of how you go through the schedule in terms of physicality and what that means for the program. And he had a good answer about why, in particular, SMU goes out and addresses, in terms of depth, offensive line, defensive line. Those are all critical pieces to get through the course of a season. And we saw with SMU's rotating of wide receivers and running backs last year, we saw it with the defensive line, what that can do, but it'll be even more paramount, and why it's important to get that quality for this type of a schedule that SMU now has to battle.
The physicality is not any different in terms of, we played Oklahoma this year. We played TCU. We played Boston College. Our guys are used to that. Year before we played at Maryland, TCU, and so on. It's not the one-game physicality is any different. Obviously there's not a lot of easy games. The average and below average teams are still better than maybe what you're used to playing. every week's a big deal. It's going to be the cumulative effect, week in, week out. Instead of playing 2 to 3 of those type of physicality games, if we played Memphis, we played Tulane, it's just as physical. It's just week in, week out, we didn't play those caliber of teams maybe on the regular. And so now when you look at 10 or maybe even 11 of your 12 games every year are going to be that's why we needed the depth. Because, the in-game play-by-play physicality isn't there, but the beating your body takes over time does add up.
So it makes a lot of sense with how they're addressing the offensive and defensive line. We talked about on the last podcast, Blake Burris being added, a guy that was injured after the first few games for Texas Tech, but you bring in a guy who's about 6'4", 6'5", 300 pounds. That's the type of depth piece SMU needed to add. They're still going to go after another defensive lineman. They're still going to go after another corner. They're still going to go after a tight end. And we've got some roster notes for you guys just a minute before we go through some of the signing day takeaways that Rhett Lashlee shared with us at the media, and as well as just kind of picking up some things from talking with coaches. And it was a great event last night at the Armstrong Fieldhouse, and SMU broke it up where the media was invited from 5 to 6, season ticket holder 6 to 8. And so I'll leave kind of the 6 to 8 stuff for the most part alone because that was a closed event. But when you look at the 5 to 6, that's unique that SMU does that, with Rhett Lashlee taking about 30 minutes to meet with us and talk about the signing class, the transfer class, all of those things that SMU has now coming down the pipeline with the transfers, and then also making the assistants available to get in-depth, coverage of where those guys' heads were at when it comes to how they went out and got some of these guys, what they think about them when it comes to the their ability to contribute to this team. Those are all things that you see it across the country at some programs, but it's not universal in terms of that happening. So I think it was really cool that SMU put that together for us in the media and allowed us to spend that time with the coaches. But so let's jump into some of the roster moves that happened. The roster was at least updated with names and some numbers on Thursday, or at least could have been Wednesday night or what have you. But a few players are at least no longer on the team according to the roster. So if there's some sort of we'll find out if there is some change. But some guys that are no longer listed on the roster, at least, are some guys that make general sense about. Or they're not surprising, I guess I should say. But running back Velton Gardner is no longer on the roster. Safety Bryce McMorris is no longer on the roster. Offensive lineman Dalton Purdue is no longer on the roster. And Cam Allen, a tight end, is no longer on the roster. Those are the guys that had eligibility left that are no longer listed. For 3 of those 4 guys, it kind of makes, or 2 of the 4, it kind of makes sense in terms of injuries. Bryce McMorris and Dalton Purdue battled a lot to be able to, in Bryce's case, return to the field. And then Dalton's case just battled. I felt like with Dalton, it was a lot of ankle here and there, and he was never able to kind of realize his potential. I loved him coming out of high school. And Bryce McMorris, having that knee injury derail his career really just sucks because he's an awesome kid as well. So when it comes to that, those guys are moving on. Velton Gardner has played a lot of college football. He could end up portaling, I guess, after the season to play somewhere else. But when you look at what SMU has at the running back position, and now bringing in Derek McFall and Brashard Smith, kind of makes sense that he's the odd guy out in terms of carries. I mean, he only got a couple. I thought he did well when he got opportunities, but he's now moving on. And then Cam Allen could never just catch on in a role. I think he played special teams this year, but SMU will be and has been looking at tight ends in the transfer portal to try to address that position, because now it is somewhat thin on that front. So you've got to address that position. We know that's one they're looking at when it comes to the May transfer portal period. So those are the roster moves that I know about. It's worth noting, I'll say, that one of the new numbers was kind of interesting. Jonathan Jefferson, the Georgia defensive line transfer, is going to wear 94, which is Braylon Jackson's number. So we'll see what happens there. Yeah, I guess Braylon will at the very least have to change his number. But that is kind of the news of the day for the most part. So now we can jump into kind of the back half of this podcast and share with you guys that there's a lot of fun things to take away from the signing day event with SMU. But first, let me quickly remind you guys about our friends at Big Game USA, the official game ball provider of SMU, made right here in Addison. You can go check them out. They're going to have some fun new footballs that'll come in at some point. They're working with the staff on it now, but you can get 10% off with your promo code BEON3. That is BEON, the number 3, for 10% off your order plus free shipping. That's the official game ball, real leather, handmade here in Addison. So check them out, biggameusa.com. Be on the lookout. They are planning to release a new ball at some point, and could be fun to get that one for what is a special 2024 football season and get it ahead of spring ball. The weather in Dallas is already starting to turn around here, and we'll see if we can escape winter without another round of being frozen out into a winter wonderland. But back to the pod. SMU, one of the key staples, I think, of this recruiting class in terms of the transfers, and we'll start there. And I know we've talked a lot about the transfers, but this is a defensive line, and SMU has gone out and addressed this position in a way that you got to feel good about if you're an SMU fan, because you know how critical that defensive line was to the turnaround this year. And we know they saw it come together in the safety group, and we know that the corners were really impressive, and the linebackers they were a question going into the season last year, and turned into one of the strengths of this team. And you could see why Maurice Crum got a well-deserved promotion there. But and Scott Simons, was really high on him and his ability to develop his group. But having the ability to rotate the way they did, we saw that in the game against Tulane. SMU just overpowered that group of Tulane offensive linemen for the most part, and SMU is able to obviously come away with a AAC championship because of the defensive line. But I think the good thing is when you look at this group, and this group now sits with Tank Booker, big man in the middle, who's going to be a Jordan Miller type. You're going to have Mike Lockhart, who is really, really productive and has played college football for multiple years. You're going to have Jonathan Jefferson, who has a chance, I think, to be really, really good, kind of maybe the Elijah Roberts of this year, breaking out with a new fresh start and being a high-level contributor. And then you have Jafar I. Harvey, who is really impressive. You have Blake Burris, who we mentioned. And then you have Omari Abor, who has a chance with a fresh start to turn it around, I think, in his career. That group, the good thing is it's not a position that you have to be just this savant when it comes to the film room. You need to have the physical tools and ability. And if they can get some of the bodies right, like a Tank Booker, maybe dropping some weight, getting Mike Lockhart, continue to just develop him and get him as ready as he can be for his 1 year, then you have a chance to have a group that can be really formidable for SMU's first season of the ACC.
That's the good thing about playing D-line is, I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's not as complicated as playing quarterback or safety, or you know what I mean? Like, I think Coach Tibbs and Coach Simons do a really good job of letting those guys play. And so I think that, over the course of 15 spring practices, a summer and a fall camp, they'll be able to pick up what we do based on where they've been. It's going to be a matter of just, getting them comfortable in the system with the guys, how we do things, how we play team defense, getting them in shape for how we want our guys to run the ball, all those kind of things, and the newness of maybe how our culture does it versus others. But, they're all veteran guys. They're not like one-year guys who are now leaving. I mean, you look at Big Mike at West Virginia and Jefferson at Georgia, and Burris at Tech, and then Tank at Arkansas. They've played a lot of ball. And so you anticipate the maturity being at a different level than a high school kid, to where by the time we get to August, if we do our job and they're willing, which they have been great so far, then I think they'll be ready to go. And we need them. I mean, if you look at our defense, a lot returns, but the middle of our defense and the D tackle spot in that corner, we lost some guys. And so that was a big position of need for us.
Yeah, it sure was. And SMU will go out and try to find one more defensive tackle to make make things work on that front. And if they do, if it's the quality that you would hope, a guy that could be a true rotational guy, maybe. I mean, this is why we talk about Pony Sports DTX. I mean, so why they're raising money is to go out and find a guy that can be a difference maker for SMU on the field, at the defensive tackle spot, and another spot is cornerback that Rhett Lashlee mentioned. And Deuce Harmon has done it in the SEC. He's played on a very good defense. I think SMU would love to find somebody with some years to come. But talking with the coaching staff and Ricky Hunley, I mean, they credited a lot of Deuce Harmon being at SMU to Jonathan McGill, just being a guy that can recruit for SMU and being an example of why this worked out. The staff credited a lot of the Miami guys for recruiting Jafari Harvey, who I mentioned on podcast past, that Texas A&M turned up the heat in a massive way on that guy and trying to get him to come their way, and he was able to, and they were able to to get him across the finish line and get him on campus, which is really, really important. Probably one of the more important things that's happened. That gives you Isaiah Smith, Cam Robertson, and Jafari Harvey. I mean, that is a potentially dominant group overall, and I really like what they put together there at the edge rusher position. And then when you look at the rest of the transfer group, I think a couple notes that I picked up is Savion Burr is probably going to be a right tackle or a swing 6 offensive linemen is what it sounds like. And they're looking to, and I was talking with Garen Justice about this, they're looking to find his confidence, because one thing Coach Justice told me is Savion Byrd, has so much in terms of football IQ. And when they sat down and talked ball, he went from being a guy that they wanted and could see bringing him in and him contributing, to him being this guy that they needed. And they needed to get him from Oklahoma. And Oklahoma, with their departures on the offensive line, fought to get him back. But SMU was able to slam the door on that. So I think expectations for me are starting to maybe tick up a little bit in terms of what Savion Byrd could bring to the table for SMU. He and PJ Williams are probably going to battle for that right tackle spot vacated by Hiron White. And that'll be a good battle to watch in the spring. It'll start then. It won't be one that we've got to wait long to see. But Garen Justice is always tinkering with the offensive line. And so I'm sure we'll see some of that in the spring. And then Nate Anderson is a guy that they like a little bit more than I think people realize. You kind of compared him to Logan Parr. Now, granted, you have Justin Osborne, you have Logan Parr back, but there's still an opportunity there where SMU could get a guy like Nate Anderson to break into the lineup and contribute a little bit. That would be nice to see if you're SMU. So we will keep an eye out on it on that front on the offensive line. And then Ashton Cozart was an interesting one. Hearing Rob Likens talk about him, where they recruited him for a while when he was at Miami, and they have a relationship already. But when it comes to his ability to go get the ball, that was something that stuck out to Rob Likens when watching him. And he's a guy that's got 4 years, and he doesn't necessarily have to be an instant impact guy because of the guys they have coming back. They don't need him to be the guy right away. But just hearing what Rob Likens had to say about him, you could tell that there was a little bit more to like about him maybe than even I talked about how I going to need to see it from him. But there's some film that he showed from the high school ranks that just suggested that maybe this is a guy that could end up being a key guy for SMU down the stretch in the future. Not necessarily in the 2024 season, but maybe beyond. Remember, SMU has 5, 6 receivers that are entering their final season of college eligibility. So there's going to be a lot of changes at the receiver position. And as Rob Likens said, he's got a lot of work to do over the future when it comes to that. So we'll be watching that closely. Trying to think if there's anything else that stuck out on the transfer side of things, but really not really. We've broken down that group a lot. Blake Burris was obviously the new addition for the program, but when it comes to the SMU 2024 class, we've also broken that down a good bit. But Rhett Lashlee, and I love this. This is a good question from one of our reporter friends there, and Rhett. I just don't think he likes to single out guys very often, but he got a good answer out of him. He was asked, what are the guys that might be that instant impact type of player, and this is what Rhett Lashlee had to say about him.
I think, look, quarterback and O-line takes some time. So I think if you look on the offensive side, Derek McFall's a guy who physically could probably translate quicker than others, whether it's on teams, at running back, and offensively you can get creative with those guys. So we're excited about him. Not to say those other guys can't, and then I think you look on the defensive side, with the depth we have at a lot of places, with the depth at safety, it gives those safeties some time to develop. I think with the depth at linebacker, although I think both Brandon and Zach are really good. They don't have to be thrust into it, but you never know, by middle of the season later, they very well could be ready to roll, and we're going to play the best guys. Same thing up front. I think probably corner is probably where, you could see Speedy Nettles and his length and his size that would allow him to translate quickly. And the fact that we do like the 3 or 4 returning corners we have, and we feel good about Deuce, but we still need that depth. So I think him or someone like A-Rod with that kind of speed could translate maybe quicker than some others.
Yeah, I thought one of the most interesting things that I picked up last night was SMU looking at Speedy Nettles as a guy that could end up being used a little bit on the offensive side of the ball. And some of the clips they showed of him, and look, I mean, he's a high 3-star for us at On3. I mean, we're looking at the rankings. We're the highest on him out of anyone, but he is from Caps, which is something that is worth noting. And sometimes those guys do take a minute to develop. But that said, Speedy has the size, I think, to maybe figure it out a little bit earlier than even some might expect him to, just because he's not going to be somebody that necessarily needs to spend time in the weight room and develop in that sense. He's going to be somebody that just can fit in physically right away, which is one of the hardest things to do when it comes to college football, is that you've got to be able to hold your own physically. And there's very the percentage of the guys that come in that are slight or undersized and things like that end up working out. It just doesn't happen as often as people want to believe in terms of the sleeper types. So SMU's hoping that Speedy Nettles, with his size and his like, he's kind of like rocked up physically, if he can be kind of like a rotational guy, that would be an interesting early contributor option for SMU, just because as of now, the cornerback room doesn't the cornerback room doesn't scream depth or proven depth in a way. You have Deuce Harmon, you have Jahari Rogers, you have Jalen Davis Robinson, you have AJ Davis up next. It's just an interesting group to look at overall. So SMU will be kind of keeping a close eye on his development once he gets to campus this summer. So Speedy will join the team this summer. So that was one thing, though. They showed some highlights of him making some plays down the field that were really, really impressive. So I'm excited to see what happens with his development. He's a good kid. As Ricky Henley kind of joked with some people last night, he just needed to see the light a little bit, or it took him a minute to kind of see the light there as he went through the recruiting process, since he was committed to to Purdue at one point. When I spoke with De'Aaron King, and everybody loves to talk about quarterbacks, Tyler Aronson is a guy that he's known, and I forgot about this, and I asked him, the question, what was it like coming in kind of late on Tyler Aronson when it comes to his recruitment. And he said, well, I've been knowing Tyler for a long, long time, back at Miami. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. Which just goes to show at times how long, De'Aaron King has been around. But, they had a good relationship. I think the thing that De'Aaron honed in on when we were talking was that he's going to be somebody that can make the throws that are off schedule. And when you watch his senior tape, that's something that, and really, I mean, throughout his high school career, but his senior tape in particular, that has always kind of caught my eye with him, is when his body is kind of turned and contorted a little bit, he can make throws that are really impressive. So they're pretty high on Tyler Aronson and what he could do and develop into over the course of his career. And it makes sense. I mean, they started recruiting him back, at Miami when Rhett Lashlee and the staff were at Miami. So they're very high on him, and he's been on campus now a few weeks, but they haven't been able to see him throw in person or anything like that. The team's doing OTAs on its own right now, so the coaches will be able to be in there pretty soon to see what those guys are working on. And I'm sure once they get into spring ball, he's going to be one of the guys that we're going to be most excited to see, just because quarterbacks are always all the rage. And I guess one other thing I forgot to note, and we've been going on now on the pod for a little bit, so I don't think I mentioned it, but Preston Stone won't be 100%. Some people are probably like, oh, you should have led with that, but Preston Stone won't be 100% until this summer. This was all kind of planned when this surgery happened on his broken leg. He wasn't going to be a full go during spring practice. And so this isn't new. This isn't unexpected when it comes to, the program missing Preston Stone in spring ball. But he will be available, it sounds like, to do some 7-on-7, to do some routes on air and things like that, maybe towards the back part of spring, from what Rhett Lashlee said. And so we'll be kind of monitoring that when it comes to his just overall kind of just progress in recovery and things like that. And we'll be watching it closely. But what it will allow is SMU to get some more reps in for Kevin Jennings, and allow him to develop a little bit more. So we'll be continuing to send well wishes to Preston. I saw him last week when we toured the end zone complex, and he was walking around just fine. He's got a splint, is what Rhett Lashlee called it, and he's running in the zero gravity treadmill. So he's in good shape and getting closer and closer. But yeah, it doesn't sound like he'll be doing 11-on-11 work in the spring. So there, we talked all about quarterbacks. Now we talked about the guys that could fit into the team early on. One of the guys that I think is worth mentioning without a doubt is Derek McFall, and getting a chance. And this goes hand in hand with Brashard Smith and how he's going to fit in, the Miami transfer who's on campus now. But and Casey Woods talked about Brashard Smith after Kyle Cooper talked about Derek McFall, and it's basically the same kind of pitch and idea, is that these guys can play running back, they can catch the ball as well, and they can impact the return game. And I saw Derek McFall in person, and he was on a young Tyler team, and he was kind of asked to do it all himself. And that kind of, I think, hurt him overall as far as the notoriety, game in, game out as a senior. I campaigned to try to get him as a 4-star prospect and just list him as an athlete and get it. But I kind of get it. Sometimes guys without a position are tough to project, and some of the hit hit rate can kind of be a little off at times. But when it comes to his potential, he is very, very good. Some of the plays that they highlighted and you can watch the film on this, so this isn't like groundbreaking, but I mean, he just runs by guys, and there's a reason why I think he's got a chance to play early, and it's just his explosive playmaking. And it wouldn't shock me if we saw Brashard Smith back there returning kicks, and then saw maybe Derek McFall next to him and just have him hand it off to him, and then you have Rod Daniels returning punts. And we saw what he can do when he gets loose on those. So it's exciting times now, and I think one other interesting piece to this was SMU self-scouted itself during the fall, during the bye week. And they realized that they had certain needs that they needed to fill. And one thing that I think the balance and I kind of think the slot receiver position is, I mean, you add Randy Reese to the roster too now, a gray shirt from the 2023 class. That slot position and kind of versatile, gadgety type of player, I mean, it's packed. It's packed, quite frankly. But I think the thing is that they're never going to turn down players that can play and play at a high level. And you wouldn't turn down Derek McFall. And that's where I think they came from when they ultimately decided to bring in Brashard Smith. Rhett Lashlee said, do we have a guy that can do this against the ACC that has already done that? No, the answer was no. And so they ended up going in on him and wanting to bring him on board. So, for me, I think it makes a lot of sense. And the way they explained it was really kind of interesting. Just that balance between bringing in players that can help you right now and also balancing roster numbers and realizing, wow, we need a guy that is that good and that has done it at the ACC level. And that's kind of how they felt about Brashard Smith. So that's why they brought him in. I mean, he's just that he's done it against Louisville. He's done it against North Carolina. He's done it against others. So that's kind of the impact he can bring. And in that same light, Derek McFall is kind of the future of that type of explosive role that SMU needed to bring in the transfer portal. And they did with Derek McFall in the high school ranks. So I think there's going to be a lot more coverage of the signing class in the coming weeks. I mean, we've got, between Kevin Lundquist and myself, we've got probably an hour of, one-off conversations with coaches that will be breaking out on the site. So if you're not on the ontheponyexpress.com, check us out $1 for your first 2 months using our special YouTube channel code SMU1. That's SMU, the number 1. Enter it at ontheponyexpress.com. It's great seeing some familiar faces at the signing day event as well. Some of our subscribers and good friends of the site. So that puts a bow on another 2024 recruiting class. But before we go, I got to remind you guys about our friends at StatusJet. Telling you, spring break is coming up. Talk with your friends, talk with your family, and remind them that you have code PonyUpACC for a discount on a round-trip flight with StatusJet. And you can also mention on theponyexpress.com, they'll take care of you and give you a discount on the with StatusJet on a round trip flight. So just mention us, and we'll be able to get you hooked up with a discount. And StatusJet has a team of folks there right here in Dallas, and that are proud supporters of SMU that will go down and help you through this process and really make sure it is that personal level of approach that you expect from a private jet experience. So please reach out to David Henry and his team at statusjet.com. You can email them. You can grab the phone number off the site right there and just tell them On the Pony Express sent you and that you're looking to explore your options, whether it's spring break, whether it's a quick trip. We're getting to work here on the ACC options for you guys. And now with the news that SMU's headed to Nevada to play the Wolfpack, maybe we'll have to get something for that game against Reno in Reno lined up. So we'll be talking with them about that too, some experiences for you guys on that front. So with that, guys, the basketball team won last night, Wednesday, 95-69 on the road in Houston. Jordan Hoffeditz officially joined on theponyexpress.com. He had full coverage of that. The Mustangs do have North Texas on Super Bowl Sunday, which, by the way, make sure you're watching. Rashee Rice is set to play in the Super Bowl for the Kansas City Chiefs against the San Francisco 49ers. So exciting times for SMU. Unfortunately, Danny Gray with the 49ers is, I believe he's injured. And so he won't end up playing in the Super Bowl, I don't believe. So that'll mean he's on the injured reserve. So, and that just piecing it together off the injury wire there. So I'm pretty sure I'm right on that. But 2 Mustangs will technically be in Las Vegas for the Super Bowl. So hope you guys enjoy your Super Bowl Sunday. We'll have your coverage of SMU UNT at 1:00 on Sunday as well. So I hope you guys enjoy that. Appreciate all you guys who have subscribed. It's been awesome having Kevin and now Jordan on the site. So a trio of us now giving you guys the best coverage on the Mustangs. Hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. We will catch you guys next week with another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you guys next time. Enjoy the Super Bowl.
Thanks for listening to the On the Pony Express podcast with Billy Embody. Follow us on your socials on X at SMU_on3 and on Instagram at on3SMU. And keep it locked to ontheponyexpress.com for more coverage.